topography module will allow you to make all the conventional measurements of a topographer, but thanks to OCT technology, you will also be able to see the back of the eye. So, in an easy, fast, and integrated way, and with the possibility of incorporating it at any time, you will be able to have a complete topography study. You will not need additional equipment. You will be able to integrate it to the same OCT clinical history, and you will be able to have very valuable information such as keratoconus screening, and also within the 16 maps, we have maps of the posterior segment, something that is very valuable when making a topography analysis with confidence. To load a new patient, we will select the patient icon with a plus symbol in the upper left corner. Then, in Patient ID, we can enter an ID number to make it a unique identification for that patient, so that in the remote platform, all the studies in the Huvitz ecosystem go with the same patient. We can enter a name, gender, and in the case of ethnicity, it is important to choose, in the case of South America, Latino. We can add information such as refraction, the operator that is going to perform the study, and the doctor who requested the study. Once we have the data loaded, we select OK, and we will have everything ready to do all the necessary measurements. To do the topography study, once the patient is selected, go to the Measure tab. And here we are going to select the upper menu, where we have the anterior option. In this case, we are going to choose the last option, which is the topography, where we can choose if the sensitivity is ultra-fine, fine, or normal. In this case, we select fine, and we will go to the Capture tab. It is very important before starting the capture that the instrument is as pushed back as possible, verify that the lens is clean, place the necessary silicone supplement to be able to position the patient properly. And once we have all that, we verify that the patient is positioned correctly with the chin and with the forehead. And we are going to move the instrument so that we can see the eye on the main camera. Once we have this configuration, we select Scan Start, and we will already see the OCT signal. And we will move slightly forward until we see the image of the cornea on the screen. We will have two images, one at the top and one at the bottom. First, we will focus on the upper image, and our goal will be guided by the video image to be as centered on the pupil as possible. To move the instrument up and down until we see the vertical beam. This is telling us we are capturing the patient properly. We can tell the patient to focus on the green fixation light, and at this moment, once we see the vertical beam in the upper part, if we move the instrument laterally, we will see that the two vertical light beams will be aligned with the blue line, and we will try to place the cornea as close as possible to the red line. Once we have this configuration, for example here, we press Optimize, which will give us an optimal signal-to-noise ratio for capturing. And when we are ready to take the measurement, we can tell the patient to keep their eye open and stay as still as possible. We make a capture and we obtain a topography image. As we can see here, we have a cut selector where we can check all the measurements that were taken. In case the patient blinked or we want to improve the signal even more, we can return quickly with retry. This way the study is not saved and we return quickly to the capture position. We can choose OK to save it and continue with another measurement, or Analyze, where it will not only save it, but it will also show us the report and the analysis of the topography that we just did. Once we finish measuring the first eye, we are going to push the instrument as close to us as possible. We switch to the other eye, and the equipment will automatically detect whether it is the left or right eye, and we repeat the same steps. First, we center the camera on the pupil to get a good image, and then we select Scan Start, and then we move forward. Once we find the cornea in the image, we repeat the same procedure of finding by moving up and down the light beam. We select Optimize so as to obtain the best signal-to-noise ratio, and once we are ready to capture, we will ask the patient to stay as still as possible. Perfect. Here we can check again. We have an optimal signal-to-noise ratio of 7 out of 10, the light beam well defined, and we have all the cuts and in high definition. In this case, we are going to analyze, and we can choose what kind of report we want to do. It will allow us to choose the types of maps. We have up to 16 maps to choose from, and also the information regarding the case, for example, the pachymetry and the keratoconus detection. Here we are in the Topography Analysis tab. In this case, we are seeing only the left eye. We can also choose to see the tab for both eyes, where we will see the relevant information of each eye, and it allows us to configure what we want to show in the report. In the case of a patient who already has a history, we will be able to choose previous studies. Then we select the date of the study, and we will be able to see a previous study and a comparison of both eyes. In this case, as it is a patient we have just loaded, we do not have the comparison and progression option enabled. This would allow us to compare the evolution of the same eye in the case of progression and the comparison with a previous study in a very quick and easy way. Once we have decided what type of report we want to do and the maps we want to display, we can press the report button. This way, we have the possibility to print it either on a physical printer or a PDF printer. This file can be printed either on a network location, for example, or on a physical USB storage disk. We can also evaluate different ways of displaying it. For example, in this case, we have 4 maps of which we can select which one we want. For example, posterior elevation. We can see the OCT capture images, and here we can display, if we want, the central keratometry, the meridians, the semi-meridians, the keratoconus screening, where if something is detected, the coefficient that is out of range will appear in red, and also the pachymetry data. We also have the Summarize option. Summarize will allow us to have 4 maps and all the numerical information of the study. So this report will be a very complete report in terms of numerical information. We can also make a report specifically with one of the maps. For example, the posterior elevation map. In this case, pressing the dots on the lower left, we can choose what kind of scale we want, whether it's ISO, American or basic, if we want absolute values, in microns, how many steps we want to display on screen, and if we want to overlay, for example, the averages. This configuration, once we choose it, will be set as default, and every time we make the same report, it will come out in this way. Once we finish the report, we can go back to the main screen and continue doing other types of studies on the same patient. In conclusion, what I find very appealing about being able to add modules to the OCT is that in the case of topography, we have something that is very valuable, which is to make posterior segment maps. That is a very beneficial complement to add to a topography. I think these are modules that add value, that add possibilities of measurement confirmation. You can do a screening with a conventional topographer, and if you have the suspicion of a pathology or something, you can add the posterior segment with an OCT module. And other benefit is that you don't need to order the modules by default. All devices come pre-calibrated and are ready and available to activate.